Hi, this is Steve Sabadeski, publisher of BayouBuzz.com. And today we're going to be talking to Arnie Fielkow. Just about everybody here knows Arnie Fielkow, but those who haven't had the pleasure, Arnie is an old friend of mine. He's a former president of the New Orleans Saints. And after Katrina, he became New Orleans City Councilman and then president of the New Orleans City Council. A few years after that, he took off for Chicago, became president of the the National Basketball Retired Players Association. And now I'm happy to say that the president of the Greater New Orleans Jewish Federation. So Arnie, how are you doing today?
Good, Steve. It's a pleasure to join you, and we're all of us are living in this virtual world, so we're getting used to Zoom and other technologies. But it's wonderful to be able to converse with you, and look forward to our discussion.
So that being the case, if anybody has a question or a comment, I will be looking to get whatever comments or questions that you might have. So let's. First, talk about, if you don't mind, let's talk about where actually the city of New Orleans is going to reopen on Saturday. Tell us what you know about that.
Well, obviously, like everyone else, I have been following the declarations earlier this week on Monday by Governor Edwards, and then Tuesday by Mayor Cantrell and Jefferson Parish President Lee Sheng. They're pretty similar. There are a few differences, certainly between New Orleans and the state. But I have to say, and I've said this pretty publicly and also privately for the last month, I really want to commend our governor, Mayor Cantrell, all of our regional officials, our New Orleans City Council. I think they've done an outstanding job navigating the crisis, prioritizing citizen health, trying to keep us safe. And we will see. I think all of us are, we understand that there has to be some reopening of society for many reasons that I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think all of us are also, or at least I am, I'm very concerned about the safety. Steve, we've lost over 2,200 Louisiana residents, almost 1,000 people from our own local community. Those numbers are staggering, and it's a frightening disease and virus, and I don't want to see any more loss of life. That's really my top priority right now, is the loss of life. We've been able to avoid a healthcare capacity crisis due to good decision making with our hospitals, but I am hopeful that if we start to open very slowly, that people will follow the rules, follow the mandates, even if not a mandate, still follow the safety precautions in order to keep people safe, if not for themselves, for others.
So you give them pretty good marks. How do you compare them to others around the country? I mean, without specifying any particular state, but just in general.
Yeah. No, I think our state and local leaders have done an outstanding job. It's not an easy job. I was in office in the months after Katrina. There are life decisions that are being made. There's no rule book to follow in many cases. And I just think from the governor to the mayor to our elected officials in our region, they've really done a great job. And what I like about what they've done, and others have done this well, but I think in Louisiana and in the New Orleans area, they've done it even better. They have really focused on citizen health from the very beginning. And they said that we're going to let science and health guide us. And that's the right approach that we should be doing. When I look around at other parts of the country, I will tell you, I'm a little frustrated and a bit disappointed with some of our leaders. I think that, first of all, we should have had and should today have a stronger federal response. I think decentralizing some of these efforts is not the wisest thing to do. And I'll give you two examples, if I may. To have different states with different reopening rules and different requirements next to each other, really, to me, makes no sense at all. In Mississippi, you can have one set of rules, I believe, like their restaurant rules. I think they started at a 50% opening, I believe. I saw we're at 25%. We're not going to close the borders. We're not going to keep people from Mississippi out, no more than they're going to keep people from New Orleans from going to the Gulf Coast. But we should have uniform standards. That's going to be the best way to protect people. The other story that's in the news in the last 24 hours that really dismays me is my home state of Wisconsin. And for people that don't know, they have a Democratic governor who I believe has in many ways followed a lot of the rules that Governor Edwards has followed in terms of health. He has erred on the side of protecting citizens' health, and that he's faced with a legislature like we had in Louisiana, not our entire legislature, but a few leaders that wanted to overturn the powers of the governor on his emergency authority. Well, that case yesterday went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court sided against the governor. And as I'm reading some of the articles today, they're in a state of some chaos in Wisconsin right now because you don't really know what the reopening rules are. As you know, Wisconsin has a lot of taverns, for example. There's a very strong organization called the Tavern League of Wisconsin. Immediately upon the Supreme Court ruling yesterday, they said all taverns and bars in Wisconsin are open. Is that really what we want to see from government? Is that the uniformity we want to see? I don't think so. And, that would be one of my biggest complaints as to what's gone on in the last 2 months.
I saw that in terms of the Supreme Court holding. What was the holding itself in terms of at least the basis of the holding? That is that people have right to access, so they have a First Amendment right to freedom, liberty. That's pretty much what people have argued throughout the country.
Yeah, I think that's the consistent legal, business, ethical argument that folks have made. Unfortunately, in most states and nationally as well, politics clearly are at play. The Wisconsin Supreme Court, I'm not expecting Louisianans to know this, but it is a majority Republican state legislature, and it is a majority Republican conservative Supreme Court. They just had an election a few weeks ago where a liberal was elected to the Supreme Court, which will make it a 5-4 majority for the conservatives. But it's very political. And unfortunately, Steve, when really the only thing that ought to be talked about right now is health, science, the economy. Those are all legitimate topics for us to talk about. It just seems not only in many states around the country, but certainly in our national politics, decisions and arguments are being driven by partisan politics. And that is, we knew that existed before COVID, clearly. It's reared, I think, its ugly face since COVID. And, I, for one, I feel like I'm sometimes living in a altered universe, because you could turn one station on at night and then another station on at night, and the cable networks we're almost in different worlds here.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be there right now. We are all in this together. We are all the victims of a terrible global pandemic, and the focus should not be in politics or partisan aspects. Focus should be on how do we keep people alive and help those people that are unemployed, help them get back on their feet in a way that's safe. And instead, I fear that some of these debates, arguments that are going on around the country really are almost just a ramp up to a national presidential election, as opposed to what we really should be focusing on.
So, as you know, I love playing devil's advocate, and I'm going to do so.
All right.
Continue to do so. And that is, for an example, you were president of the New Orleans City Council, and certainly each council person had its own, say, district, and you wouldn't want, say, have the city to impose something in your district that you didn't believe was suitable for your district. And so wouldn't the argument be that, say, Northwest Florida should not be under the same rules and guidelines as, say, Southeast Florida? I mean, or the same with Wisconsin. I mean, that's the argument that I've heard. Go ahead, please.
Well, I'd answer it in two ways. First of all, I think certainly early on you saw differences across the country of states that were hot spots and those that were not. Obviously, Louisiana, and especially the New Orleans area, Region 1, was a hot spot in late March and early May in a very big way. You looked at states like back then, like Montana, Wyoming, Maine, Vermont, that were less so. And, I think that some of the precautions, rules, standards, could be eased and could be a little bit different in that area. The problem is, I think, as we get to today, I think we've learned a lot from this virus. I think, first of all, we understand that, a state not being a hotspot may reflect the fact that they didn't do as much testing as another particular area, but it doesn't mean that that COVID does not exist there. I'm just very concerned that I don't know how you can have maximum safety when you have these disparate standards that go on. I thought, for example, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, some of the Northeast states got together. They almost formed a coalition on reopening. Some of the West Coast states as well. We did not do that in the South. And as a result, you saw our neighbors, Arkansas, Mississippi, really had very different standards, I think, in many ways than what Louisiana did in terms of sheltering at home and in terms of, what now our reopening is. The other thing that I would say, though, I think it's even more important is, and I'll use the city council example. Yeah, of course, everybody that's elected has their own electorate and their own constituency. But I think it changes when you get to an emergency situation. We saw that after Katrina. I mean, I don't think you would have wanted a mayor in a hurricane situation, saying A, and then the council member from District D and E having a whole different policy. That would be a disaster. And what I think is somewhat troublesome is, we are a country of laws. We operate by the rule of law, and we have given our governors and we've given our mayors certain emergency powers, and our president as well, that in an emergency, they have the right to basically be the boss and to make the rules and make the decisions. And when I see us trying to overturn that legislatively, and now, with Wisconsin from a judicial standpoint, I really think we're hurting ourselves. I think it goes against the rule of law in many ways. And, we fortunate in Louisiana, we've pretty much been together. And again, I give a lot of credit to the governor of holding all of our parishes together with many of the same standards throughout. But, to have a situation where different parishes or counties in other states would be doing one thing and not being done in the other, or different adjoining states doing one thing and not the other. I worry about the fact that at the end of the day, what's going to really hurt us is health. And, I think we can all agree on one thing, and that is that as we're reopening, if a month from now we have to pull back and go back to a sheltering situation and close the economy totally back again, that's the worst consequence of all. So I just think we need to be very cautious. I wish, and again, I'm not really being overly critical because this is a playbook that nobody had. Nobody has navigated and responded to a situation exactly like this. So we're all learning. By each and every day, we're learning new things. And I just hope that our elected officials, as we now have made the decision to reopen Louisiana, New Orleans area, I hope that we proceed cautiously, that we proceed with health of our citizens top of mind. And if things need to change, that they rapidly change so that we don't get into a New York situation that we would never want to see here.